The air doesn't just freeze your lungs at -60. It crystallizes the moisture inside your nostrils before you finish inhaling. Your eyelashes stick together when you blink. Exposed skin begins dying in under 2 minutes. This wasn't a place humans were supposed to survive, and yet 20,000 years ago, they didn't just survive here, they thrived. The mistake we make is thinking they conquered the cold through endurance, through suffering harder than we ever could. That's wrong. What they mastered was something far more dangerous to lose. A complete system of knowledge that turned physics itself into a weapon against the void. And at the center of that system was a fishing method so counterintuitive, so seemingly impossible, that when archaeologists first found the evidence, they assumed it was ceremonial, decorative, anything but functional. They were looking at the tools that kept entire family groups alive through 4-month winters when nothing else moved above the ice. The cold at -60 doesn't behave like cold at 0. It's not a matter of adding layers. Wind chill at that temperature can push the effective feeling past -100. Your breath becomes a liability. Each exhalation dumps moisture into the air around your face. Moisture that freezes into a cloud of ice crystals that cling to any fabric covering your mouth. Within an hour, that fabric becomes a frozen mask that restricts breathing and conducts cold directly onto your skin. First-time deaths in extreme cold often come from suffocation, not freezing. The people who lived through this understood moisture as the enemy, not the cold itself, but water in the wrong place. They built shelters half buried into the earth, insulated with alternating layers of moss, hide, and packed snow. The structure itself was engineering, a low-entrance tunnel that trapped cold air beneath the living space, a smoke hole positioned to create draw without creating wind tunnels, walls thick enough that the metabolic heat from 8 or 10 bodies could raise the interior temperature 40 degrees above outside air without any fire at all. But here's what breaks the Hollywood version of Ice Age: survival. They didn't burn massive fires. They couldn't. Wood was scarce, scattered in frozen valleys, days of travel apart. A fire large enough to heat a shelter would consume a week's worth of gathered fuel in a single night. Instead, they carried embers, small, controlled heat sources wrapped in moss and clay, kept alive for months. These embers heated stones. Those stones were rotated into the shelter, radiating warmth for hours. The entire system ran on perhaps 1/10 of the fuel we imagine, and then winter would settle in. The herds would migrate south, following the edge of the glaciers to grazing land humans couldn't reach on foot. For 4 months, maybe longer, the primary protein source vanished. Small game burrowed deep or died. Birds were gone. The landscape became a white desert where nothing moved except wind and snow. Except beneath the ice, life continued. Char, grayling, ancient relatives of salmon and trout, species adapted to water so cold it hovered just above freezing year-round. They gathered in deep pools beneath the thickest ice, slow-moving, lethargic, but alive, accessible. And here's where the impossible part begins. Because fishing through ice in -60 temperatures isn't difficult, it's thermodynamically insane. You can't drill through 3 feet of ice and leave a hole open to air at those temperatures. The hole refreezes in minutes. Your hands, wet from contact with water, develop frostbite before you can even bait a line. Any fishing line made from sinew or plant fiber stiffens and becomes brittle in the cold, and you can't feel a bite through frozen hands wrapped in fur mittens thick enough to keep you alive. Modern ice fishing requires steel augers, synthetic lines, insulated shelters, and portable heaters. Our ancestors had bone, stone, wood, and knowledge we've completely forgotten. The archaeological sites tell the story in fragments. Bone gorges, thin slivers of sharpened bone barely 2 inches long, carved with meticulous backward-facing barbs. Stone weights with holes drilled through the center. Lengths of sinew treated with rendered fat. And something else, small, carefully shaped frames made from willow branches, bent and lashed into circles, with netting woven from animal hair. For decades, researchers cataloged these items separately. Fish hooks, anchor weights, decorative dream catchers. No one connected them into a system because the system seemed impossible. Here's how it worked. First, the hole. Not drilled, but burned. They'd place heated stones directly onto the ice, letting thermal expansion create fractures, then chip away the weakened ice with bone picks. The process took hours, but it conserved body heat. Once through, they'd widen the hole to roughly the diameter of a human arm, then immediately cover it with a flat stone or frozen hide. This trapped the slightly warmer air rising from the water below and prevented immediate refreezing. The gorge, baited with tiny scraps of preserved fat, was attached to a line treated with oil to resist freezing. But here's the brilliant part. They didn't hold the line. They couldn't. Instead, they used a trigger system. The line ran through a hole in the stone weight, which sat on the ice beside the hole. The other end of the line attached to a flexible willow branch, bent into tension and anchored in the snow. When a fish swallowed the gorge and pulled, the stone weight would shift, releasing the bent branch. The branch would snap upward, yanking the fish toward the surface and, critically, pulling it partway out of the water before the person even touched the line. By the time human hands made contact, the fish was already caught and lifted clear of the refreezing hole. The woven frames served a different function entirely. They were set nets, dropped through the ice and anchored with stones, designed to catch fish passively, while the group focused on shelter maintenance or tool repair. Every few days, they'd burn a new access hole nearby, reach down with a hooked pole, and retrieve the net. Frozen fish came up like cargo, already preserved by the cold. This wasn't fishing as recreation. It was engineering protein extraction from a frozen system using only the physics available. But none of it worked alone. The shelters kept people alive long enough to fish. The fishing provided the protein to maintain body heat. The ember systems conserved fuel for treating hides and melting ice into drinking water. And crucially, all of it required cooperation. Multiple hands building, multiple minds remembering which river bends held pools, which ice thickness was safe, when to move and when to shelter. The myth of the lone survivor is a modern fantasy. Extreme cold doesn't kill people, it kills isolated people. We've lost most of this knowledge because we didn't need it anymore. Climate shifted, herds returned. Agriculture replaced hunting, and within a few thousand years, the specific techniques that kept humans alive at the edge of extinction became stories, then myths, then nothing. The tools remained in frozen ground, waiting for us to remember what they meant. What strikes researchers now, studying these sites, isn't the harshness of the environment. It's the sophistication of the response. These weren't people huddling in caves, hoping to survive until spring. They were problem solvers who understood thermodynamics, material science, and ecology at a level we're only beginning to reconstruct. They knew that survival wasn't about strength. It was about systems. About designing solutions that worked with the environment's rules instead of against them. And here's what keeps archaeologists awake at night. If we've forgotten something this fundamental, this ingenious, what else did they know? How did they find drinking water when everything was frozen solid? How did they maintain hygiene in shelters sealed against the cold for months? How did they start fires in conditions where moisture froze before it could evaporate? The ice holds answers we haven't learned to ask about yet.